Hi everyone, welcome to another Blitz review, and we are finishing up the line of review copies for Osprey Games that I've been given with Undaunted. Now this one, compared to The King is Dead that I did before, unlike that one where I was like, I'm walking into it with a bit of trepidation, this one I was really geared to love. You know, this one I've been looking forward to trying for a while. 2-player only, it's hard for me to get those to the table, which is why it's not being played up to this day, but a deck building war game of like asymmetric factions and that is like, oh, this could be interesting. I really wanted to try. I didn't care if it was Normandy or North Africa. I've got the North Africa one here. I'm pretty sure Normandy's mostly the same game at the end of the day, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I was really keen to get into this one and try it out. So what you're doing in there is you essentially have the Italian forces versus the African forces, and you have a scenario booklet with, I forget how many it is, probably like 10 to 12, I think it's 12 scenarios, 11 scenarios, but like I say, a lot of scenarios in this book. And what you are doing is that you will set up the game based on the scenarios, so you'll have a various network of these tiles, and you will be able to start off with certain amount of characters and vehicles. So you could have an anti-tank gunner, a scout, gunner, sergeant, sniper, that kind of thing. But then vehicles, somebody might have a tank, a truck, gun truck, patrol truck, and even a recon aircraft in certain scenarios. What happens is that depending on the scenario, each side will have different objectives. So somebody might have to claim certain points, somebody might have to blow them up, you might have to neutralize certain people in the opposing force, you might have to escape with your lives, you might, there's all sorts of things like that. The deck is dictated by the scenario book, so you'll have a certain amount of cards face down in the deck, but then you'll have the rest of the cards face up in a supply. So these are cards that you can acquire as the game goes on. And then what happens is you have a hand size of 4 typically, and what will happen is at the start of each round, players will play a card for initiative. So you've got to look at your cards and go, I really quite like these cards, but I really want to go first this round. You'll play it simultaneously face down, flip it over, highest number gets an initiative marker, which I think is in the box at the moment. Basically, that player will go first, do all their actions, and then the other player afterwards will do their actions, and then you do another round, you do the whole initiative thing again, so this can chop back and forth, and you carry on until somebody meets one of the endgame conditions, or it ends up in a bit of a stalemate sense where it's either stalemate or is the tiebreaker for it. But the idea is that with these cards, you use them to perform actions with the various characters you have on the map. And on the map, the characters and the vehicles are represented by tokens. You can see where they are. You'll move them around. You'll shoot at each other and knock each other out and try and claim areas. The different tiles have just basically got cover bonuses for the most part. I mean, they've got artwork to symbolize what's what, but it's really just how much cover it gives you as to what importance a different tile has. But the crux of it is these cards. So with the 4 cards that you draw, one of them is your initiative card. So you technically only have 3 cards left for the rest of the round. And then you've got to decide, well, if I play it for that ability, what do I want them to do? Do I want them to scout or control or attack or recon? Different characters and vehicles have different actions available. And so you have to basically think, well, what do I really want them to do right now? Now, in this case, I've got 3 staff sergeants in my hand, so I can make the staff sergeant do all sorts of stuff. Scout, move, and recon. I can make them do all sorts. But then that means the rest of my force isn't doing anything. But then let's say I draw, an engineer, a scout, and a sniper, and an anti-tank gunner. Right, well, I can move a lot of different people, but only get them to do one thing each. Is it better for them to move into cover? Is it better to take a pot shot at the opponent? Is it better to, focus on an objective? And when it comes to combat, essentially what happens is everybody has a defense value on their token, as well as any modifier for range and cover. And you basically just roll as many dice as your attack stat is, and you roll the die and try and equal or better their defense. That is essentially it. So there is a bit of luck factor in this, but we'll get onto that later. But that's the crux of the game.
Would this brilliant plan involve us climbing out of our trenches and walking very slowly towards the enemy, sir?
So firstly, the production of this is pretty decent. I mean, the box is quite large, but there's a fair amount in there. These are very chunky tiles that you've got for the locations. The artwork is okay, it's nothing to write home about, but it's decent enough. You've got pretty nice card quality for the various cards and the deck building ones, although I might suggest maybe sleeving these at some point. The backs of the cards don't look particularly interesting, but the card is clearly laid out. You can easily see how many dice you need, what actions they can do, and the pictures are pretty good and fit the theme of the game. The rulebook was it was okay, but it wasn't stellar. Yeah, I mean, it's a boring looking rulebook already, and much like Osprey Games kind of shtick, and this was the same with, it's the same with The King is Dead, it was the same with Imperium, they like to just not care about pictorial examples. A lot of this, I mean, not to say it's devoid of pictorial examples, there are occasional ones, but a lot of the time you get a bunch of keywords and a lot of text. That's your typical Osprey Games rulebook here. Lots of keywords, lots of text. Hopefully you understand it from the text. That being said though, I decided to come into this like hard and do it literally from the rulebook, like with no previous video experience or anything. And yes, there are videos out there. I don't know if Paul Grogan's done one for it, but you know, if not, then I'm sure somebody else has. But the idea is that I thought, look, there's two of us here. We're going to just try and play it from the rulebook. I gotta see how easy it is to pick up and play. It took us a game to get used to it. I recommend playing the first scenario in the book first to get used to the mechanics, but then once you're done with one game, you can start going into the other scenarios which bring in additional features. And you don't play with everything in every scenario, and certainly in the first scenario, it's literally just a few guys on foot. It's pretty basic. So you can ignore everything to do with vehicles in the first scenario, and you only have to bear it in mind in scenario 2. So you can kind of teach yourself this game in stages, which is good from a usability point of view. Gameplay is hit and miss for me. Firstly, the fact that you've got to roll dice in order to do the combat does mean that this game is kind of luck driven. You've already got a deck building element, which is already somewhat luck driven, but then on top of that, you're having to roll dice to hit enemies, and a lot of the time you are hitting defense values of 7+ on a d10. So the odds are not exactly in your favor, and somebody who rolls badly all the time is going to flat out lose this game compared to somebody who rolls high. It doesn't matter how efficient your deck is or anything like that. If you're not hitting them with your guns, or if you're not doing, getting the right numbers for what you need, then forget your efficient deck. You're just going to outright lose. And the deck building part of it wasn't as strong as I was hoping it would be. I do love the tension for how much you can do in a round though. That is stellar. I like the fact that you've only got 4 cards, and one of them has to be your initiative card, and you've only got 3 others to work with. That leads to so many painful decisions about what to do on your turn. It's like, I really want to use these characters, but if I use the Fog of War as my initiative card, it means I'm going last. That means they're going to get to do stuff. I might not even have this character in a second, I might get shot. And it really is like, it hurts to make that decision. Sometimes you've got to make that sacrifice and think, I can't afford to go second, gotta play a card. And then you reveal, and it's like, if they've still beaten you, it hurts, like you've given up one of your good cards and still not won the initiative. But it can also be annoying when, because if you tie, then whoever was the leader last time is still the leader. So it can be really painful when you chuck in a high card to guarantee initiative, and you find that they just play the Fog of War card. It's like, wasted a card. I could have just played a Fog of War and it would have been alright. So lots of painful decisions, but in a good way for just the initiative part, let alone deciding what you're actually going to do with each character. The staffs, let me pick a scout here. Scout, attack, conceal, recon. All useful actions, except one card for multiple actions. It's a multi-use card, which I love, but you've only got the one scout card. Do I need them to scout? Do I need them to attack? Do I need them to recon? Shall I conceal to mess up their deck? What do I do? I don't know. There's so many choices, and it really does mean you've got to think hard about what to do on your turn from a tactical standpoint. I mean, yeah, you've got like a little bit of strategy, like saying I'm going to go this direction and claim objectives and that, but you've got to react and adapt to what the cards give you. That being said, as I said before, you are kind of at the mercy of your deck as well. I mean, if the deck just chucks you a bunch of Fog of Wars in a turn, you're kind of screwed for that round and can't really do much. But then you might be really desperate to get your tank driver so that you can control an objective while the tank is sitting on it. All the while it's getting peppered with anti-tank guns from the opposing team. And you're like, where the hell is that tank driver? Where is it? I just need to control this location. And it doesn't turn up. And by the time it does, you've been shot to death and the tank's no longer in operation. So there's a little bit of a luck there that you are going to have to deal with this game. And the deck building part is not as strong as I would like because, I mean, as I said, you like that. I like the tension part, but in terms of what you add to your deck, you're basically just choosing which characters in your deck to focus on, really. You already start off with one of each. It's just a case of whether you want extra copies of them. It's not like you've got these like cool unique cards that are unique to your faction that the opponent doesn't have. It's just the fact of, well, what do I want this game? Do I want my gunners? Do I want my scouts? Or do I fancy more tank cards? I don't know. And when you've got scenarios where you've got about 7 or 8 different characters / vehicles to operate, trying to build an efficient deck with that many characters is downright impossible. You either have to have a bloated deck, which means you've got no control over what's going to act in a round, or you basically have to say, well, I'm going to focus heavily on these 3 characters, they're going to do everything, and the rest of my force is kind of just going to sit back and not do a lot, really. So, you cannot physically draw enough cards and have a decent deck with that many characters. I mean, even that's with 7 or 8 characters. I found this problem when I had 4 or 5 characters. I'd have to focus on 2, maybe 3 tops, and 2 of the others would just have to sit back and not do a lot because I just can't afford to bloat my deck. Because there's not many ways to get stuff out of your deck. I mean, you can get rid of Fog of Wars at a fairly slow rate, but in terms of character cards, it's not like you can easily get rid of them. There is an action called Hunker Down, which works, but frankly, it's not an action people want to do very often, let's put it that way. The scenarios are cool. I mean, I like the fact that there's 11 different ones in here, but they don't feel all that different to me. They kind of boil down to one of 3 different types of scenario. Claim objectives, whether by destroying or controlling structures. Okay, that's one type. Then there's a couple that are about like escaping from an area, like you're being chased and you've got to scout through and get out of the area. And then there's neutralize, which basically means killing certain characters or vehicles on the opposing team. That's pretty much what the scenarios boil down to, and the layout of the map, it's just basically, a bunch of tiles in one sort of disjointed rectangle in a sense. So it's not like you've got weird funky patterns or anything like that. It's pretty generic how the board state looks. It just creates a nice visual aid. But I just didn't find that the scenarios felt that different. They played, the objectives were different, and certainly as you get into the later scenarios, there's more toys to play with, so they're certainly a bit more fun. But then having more toys to play with means a longer scenario, because what does the boxer claim on here? I forget what it claims. Where's they normally say on the back. Here we go, yeah, 45 to 60 minutes. Yeah, with the earlier scenarios, you could get this done in 45 minutes. You do the long scenarios, though, it could take you easily over an hour. This is not the shortest game in the world, and bearing in mind, there's a fair bit of setup time because you've got to lay out all the tiles, and then you've got to go, right, hang on, what do I have in my deck? I have one of these, 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 and there's my supply. Right, there's my deck. Where do I start on this map? Now, here, 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 here. Got the initiative marker, okay, go. And because you have agonizing decisions to make, it does mean that there is a little bit of analysis paralysis potential from players. So this is not a quick war game for 2 players. This is a light rules, well, I won't even say that light a rule set. I mean, you've got a lot of different keywords in here and a lot of different things to consider, but it's lightish. It's kind of light medium level, but yeah, this is not like a gateway level war game. I think this is definitely a game for gamers. I wouldn't want to show this to somebody who's never seen games before, because I think it would just overwhelm them like crazy. So overall, I found this to be quite a clever system. This has a lot of accolades for being a very good popular 2-player game, and I think it does deserve some of those accolades. I mean, I think it was clever, the fact that they've turned a 2-player war game into a deck builder mixed with a map, and created that wonderful tension on your turn with multi-use cards where you've only got so many things you can do, and you've got that terrible initiative decision you've got to make versus what you do with the various characters. All that is pretty good. But I didn't find the scenarios to have that much variety. This wasn't a game that I felt like I wanted to play straight after the first one. Like once I played one game of this, I was kind of good. Then I could take a break and then play it later. The dice and the deck building combined does mean that there's quite a lot of luck in this game. I mean, the better player won't necessarily win the game because a lot of it might just be down to what cards turned up and what you rolled on the dice. And the deck building part is not quite a typical deck builder, which is what I was hoping more for. You're essentially just going, I'll have some of these generic cards, shove them in my deck, and there we go. There's not a huge amount of variation as to how that goes. So it feels like one of those games that you're going to play quite a few times, but eventually it's going to start feeling a little bit samey. But as I say, overall, I've still had fun with this one. I'd like to play it a few more times, maybe check out the Normandy version, and I think it's a very cool system. So overall, I'm giving Undaunted a 7 out of 10. I think this definitely deserves a seal of endorsement and is definitely one to check out if you want a interesting war-themed 2-player game. You've just got to bear those slight limitations in mind, and I don't think it really matters whether you get North Africa or Normandy. I don't know what the differences between the two are, but I can't imagine they're that much different. Pick your poison really is what I say. But yeah, it's a solid game and I'm very glad I got a chance to finally play it. So that's it for me on this Blitz review. If you like what you see, then please leave a like and a comment. It means the world to me to know that you appreciate the content and are taking notice and want to interact. But don't forget that this channel was also sponsored by Zatu.co.uk. If you want to check out more content on the channel, particularly from Osprey Games, I have recently done a Blitz review of The King is Dead, as well as a Blitz review of Cryptid. See what else they've got in their line. Osprey Games are a very cool small publisher and worth checking out. That's it for me, and remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.